My name is Elgie Sims. I have the honor and privilege of being State Senator of Illinois' 17th District. So just over about a decade, I've been serving in the Illinois General Assembly. First in the Illinois House of Representatives as chairman of the House's Judiciary Criminal Committee, and then after that, serving in the Illinois Senate since 2018. First as chairman of the state's Criminal Law Committee, and then now as the Senate's Majority Appropriations Leader and chairman of the Appropriations Committee. But I talk about those things because ever since I've started my journey as a legislator, I've focused on a couple of different things because I believe, as Dr. King does, I have the audacity to believe that people everywhere can have 3 meals for their bodies, dignity for their spirits, culture for their minds, and equality for their bodies. And I focused my legislative work on those areas because, ever since being a law student, now I didn't go to Northwestern. I went to a law school just down the street, a little more upscale school down the street, Loyola School of Law. But ever since, I remember studying in our criminal law and criminal procedure courses about Tate, the seminal case of Tate. I knew that we had to do something to reform our criminal legal system. We had to do something to protect those who were our most vulnerable. We had to do something to turn around the challenges that folks have just because they don't have access to resources. You could have someone who is wealthy and guilty walk free when someone who is poor and innocent be held in custody. There's something fundamentally unfair about that system. So as part of my legislative work throughout both my time in the Illinois House, where we passed our state's Bail Reform Act of 2017, where we tried to make sure we started us on that path towards removing away from reliance on cash to make sure that we are making decisions on what's in the best interest of our communities. And then fast forward to when I got to the Illinois Senate, we passed the landmark Safety Act, safety, accountability, transparency, and equity today. And a similar part of that law was the Pretrial Fairness Act, making Illinois the first state in the union that does not rely on one's wealth to make those determinations about detention. Now, I've got to thank all of you in this room for your commitment to providing legal services for those who can't stick up for themselves. I often talk about my time as a law student. One of my most joyous memories of law school, outside of the relationships that I was able to establish, was my time working in Loyola's Community Law Clinic, where we worked with indigent defendants. We worked with indigent individuals, trying to make sure, as a 7-Eleven, I tried to work to make sure that folks had adequate representation, and that they had the dignity that they deserved. That so oftentimes the folks who do not have access to wealthy attorneys, they don't have that. They don't feel like they're entitled to that. And I'm not talking or saying anything that the folks in this room don't already know. You know that with the large number of caseloads that you have, there are often times that you only have minutes to refer with a client before you go before a judge. Think about that. Someone who is, if you are a young person or even an older person who has never encountered the criminal legal system, and your liberty is at stake. You have to figure out, how am I, if I'm even going to be able to go home today? Well, and that's why I call our public defenders our protectors of liberty. You stand in the gaps for them. You ensure that they have the representation that they deserve, so that they do have a chance to go home, that they do have a chance to see their families, that their lives aren't irreparably harmed, so that they can make sure that they get the representation that they deserve. I look at the statistics. We recently heard from the Supreme Court. And as we were talking with the Supreme Court in the Senate Appropriations Committee, I talked about the legal deserts which exist. I'm so proud of the work that our Supreme Court has done to partner with the legislature to make sure that we have and we address those legal deserts. You think about it, 86% of all licensed attorneys across the state of Illinois are in Cook and the Collier counties. That means for the rest of the 97 counties, the other 14% of Illinois licensed attorneys are spread out across all of those other counties. That means Champaign County, Sangamon County, Peoria County, St. Clair County, and we're not even talking about the Jacksons of the world. So we are fighting a battle to make sure that we have equal representation across this state. Well, part of that is also that our public defenders are at a disadvantage. They're often at a disadvantage from a resource perspective. There are counties in Illinois where they don't have one public defender, but they have to contract with one public defender for multiple counties. We're going to address that. And how are we going to address that? I am proposing legislation called the FAIR Act. And in jurisdictions across the state, we'll be addressing those funding disparities which exist. And the FAIR Act is a transformative piece of legislation that marks a pivotal point in our criminal legal system. If passed, it may have profound implications for the future of public defense in our state. The Funding, Accountability, and Indigent Representation Act, or the FAIR Act, represents our commitment to fulfilling the constitutional promise of effective counsel for all, regardless of financial means. The FAIR Act addresses these systemic issues in three critical ways. First, it establishes dedicated and sustainable funding for public defenders' offices all across Illinois, moving away from the unpredictable and oftentimes patchwork system of local budgeting that has historically led to inequitable defense services depending on where the case is heard. Second, it implements workload standards that recognize the reality that quality representation requires adequate time and attention, something that's impossible to provide when defenders are juggling multiple cases simultaneously. And third, it mandates comprehensive data collection and transparency measures that will, for the first time, allow us to have a meaningful assessment of defense outcomes and identify areas requiring improvement or additional resources. Defendants should be able to meet their attorneys to provide the critical support, if nothing but to just calm their nerves. And that's why we are proposing the FAIR Act, to make sure that we have the opportunity to do that, to make sure that we're giving individuals the opportunity to get the representation that they deserve. Defenders should have specialized training for cases like mental health or immigration, not to be thrown into the case which they aren't prepared for. All of this and more will be addressed through the FAIR Act. The FAIR Act will build a public defense system that honors our highest ideals of justice and equity under the law, a system where the equality of representation that one receives does not depend on the wealth that one possesses. The implications of these changes cannot be overstated because we stand on the brink of a new era in public defense. We started with the Pretrial Fairness Act. We are now looking to address the issues that you address on a daily basis. And that means one where the scales of justice finally find balance. The passage of the FAIR Act will reflect that a fair criminal legal system depends on strong public defense. It acknowledges that every stakeholder in our system, judges, prosecutors, law enforcement, and the public itself, benefits when defenders receive quality representation. It's time for us to come together and seize the opportunity to create lasting change that will benefit communities for generations to come. I would leave you, as I take my seat, I will leave you with this, because I know you are dealing with quite a bit. In order for wine to be created, grapes must be crushed. In order for oil to be gathered, olives must be pressed. In order for seeds to grow, they must have darkness. And as all of you, so valuable as you are, as diamonds are created, pressure must be applied to coal. All of you are diamonds. All of you are the protectors of liberty. You are that instrumental part of our criminal legal system, standing in the vanguard for those who cannot protect themselves. And I thank you for being willing to stand up in the gap for those individuals who cannot protect themselves. Thank you so much. I appreciate all that you do. Have a great conference. I'm looking forward to the policy discussions, and thanks for having me.